Hello, my friends. It is FPS Astro here today. Definitely not drinking vodka from Fiji water bottle, but don't worry, everything fine. Here to talk to you today about how I'm going to fuck you with out of money written call because I'm hedgy and I try to take your money. All right, jokes and shit aside, including my sunglasses. We're going to dispel a lot of stupidity, ignorance, and outright misunderstanding of options, as well as why I'm going to be loading up on options more than ever. None of this is financial advice, never has been, is not, never goddamn will be. If you enjoy the video, like, sub, fondle my balls, the usual, appreciate it. Let's get right into the shit show here. So over the past 12 months, there's been a lot of outright stupidity, like just incessantly egregious amounts of ignorance being spewed and spouted and sprung across every publicly discussed social media board that the earth knows about right now. And it has driven me insane. I've got tons of videos about options, how they work, how you can use them to hedge, how you can use them to hopefully make some more money for yourself. Just all the ins and outs, mechanics, and the way they work, right? And if you go on Reddit or on Twitter or anywhere that you don't actually see the person telling you things, you're going to get just raped and bombarded and spewed with, well, options are the hedgies. That's how they make money. They're stealing your money with these calls and you can't buy puts and... Like, it's incredibly fucking stupid. And if you ever ask one of these idiots why they claim this, they couldn't even tell you what delta means, let alone any of the other Greeks, or even how premiums work. And, oh, by the way, options are actually inherently based for hedging. They're a hedging instrument in the finance world. So, of course, if you're going to look to options as a way to make exuberant amounts of returns and alpha, you're in for a very bad time because that's not what they're intended for. However, they do bear the other side of the token where you can use these as some form of actual asset acquisition. You can buy leaps, which we'll get into later, or you could hedge for downside or upside depending on what your underlying position is. But no one on Twitter or Reddit or anywhere that you can't actually see the person you're talking to will ever say has to do with any of these facts and the way that these things work. So anywho, I want to talk about why I'm going to be using options more than ever, or rather I'll be buying more than ever going into these next couple months. There's a few things that have to be discerned first, and one of them being whether you think that the MOAS or the mother of all short squeezes or whatever term you want to give it is going to be one giant thing sometime in the future, or if there will be cyclical episodic squeezes like I've covered and researched and presented for the past 12 months. You have to figure out what you think that will be because that will ultimately define what your strategy is moving forward. So I'm under the conviction that there will be tons of cyclical squeezes until the wheels come falling off and the whole entire thing falls apart, and whoever is maintaining this massive short position via other financial instruments, until that falls off, you will find that there will be these crazy moves up and down, and you will find market makers and other institutions and other retail investors capitalizing on this volatility, and that is what ultimately leads to the mechanics of the cyclical squeeze, and that is what I'm convinced of. So the way that I'm going to capitalize on that is by buying a variety of expired calls, or expired calls rather, expirations in variety. So we're going to get into like the raw mechanics of this later on. I've got plenty of videos already as it is that you can look into, but I want to make it clear that options are not a bad thing. And so many people just continue to scream about how they're a bad thing. I'm going to try to explain some concepts that are within the options world that lead to some really, really crazy volatility. So with that all being said, I want to dive into some concepts that options, because of what they are, present to the table for what the underlying does, aka the stock, and why you see a lot of these moves, whether it's 100% in one day or 50% in one day, up or down, why this happens and why options are to either be blamed, depending on who you are, or to be praised for. I'm going to try to explain them as simply as I possibly can. No visuals, just straight up explanation. No visuals because I like to think that the way I'm going to explain it is intuitive enough for anyone to understand. So delta hedging, you hear this term a lot. Delta hedging is simply the result of anyone who writes a contract. We're going to use calls in this example. If I write a call, that is inherently a bearish move because I think, or I'm claiming the premium of something that I'm expecting to go down. If I write a call at the top and then the price falls down on the underlying, then that call will inherently be worth less than when I wrote it. Okay, so then I can buy it back, and I've netted that difference, right? I shorted via calls. You can see the opposite happen with puts. If I write a put at the bottom, right, and the put's value is based on how low the stock is, relatively speaking, then if the stock goes up, then the value, the premium of that put will go down, and I can buy it back, and I net the difference. So the reason why that this happens is because of delta, right? And delta is representative of how much your option gains in value per 1 penny or $1 increment. So when you see the term delta hedging, all that means is that someone who has written, or a team or a group, some entity has written a ton of options at some part of the chain. Let's say they've written calls and they're trying to claim a bearish position on the underlying. If I write a ton of calls, yet the underlying continues to go up, well, now I'm losing money. Because in the previous example, if the stock went down, then I could buy it back cheaper. But in this case, it's becoming more expensive. If I haven't already hedged for the shares responsible on these calls, then I have to go and buy those shares in the event that those who bought my calls want to exercise them. I have to hedge for that via buying the underlying. So if I write a call at 0.5 delta and the thing goes up and now it's at 0.6, well, now I have to go and buy 10 shares, right? So delta hedging can be responsible for a lot of volatile upward movement in the event that someone has to hedge for the underlying moving up. You'll see this a lot pretty much anywhere in the market, especially right now with indices that are being tossed back and forth price-wise and volatility-wise. But delta hedging is where I have to go and buy stock that I don't have yet because the call that I wrote does not have the amount of shares responsible in the event that someone tries to exercise. Okay. I know that's a lot to take on, but hopefully that made sense. Gamma squeezes, right? Gamma is the derivative of delta, right? So if you think of delta as like a velocity or a speed, well, then gamma is the acceleration. So you would see how fast something is becoming faster. If I'm going 60 miles an hour, right, that means that I'm going 60 miles per hour. But if I start to accelerate, then I will begin to move faster, right? And the difference of that is the acceleration. So gamma, though, is vulnerable to volatility. In the event that the volatility models of your option start to see that things are more volatile than some relative point, then you have to have some way to compensate for that because now there's more risk involved. And in the event of more risk, then there should be more premium on both sides. So if something begins to gamma squeeze, that is because gamma has become inflated in value. And now because gamma has inflated in value, then delta will also inflate with that because gamma is your rate of acceleration. So if you're already going at a certain speed and now your delta in speed, or your change in speed rather, becomes more volatile or faster or slower in magnitude, then you will have your delta increase with that because your gamma is increasing. I hope that makes sense. So in the event of a gamma squeeze, it is because the value of delta has become inflated momentarily by gamma. If a gamma squeeze takes place, that is because delta is becoming unhedgeable, or you can't adequately hedge for it because of how volatile the environment is. So what does this all mean? What the fuck does this mean? When you play options during a squeeze, right? And I've said for a very long time, if everyone were able to figure out like an intermediate level of playing options, that the squeeze would happen within a month, plain and simple. In the event that retail were to figure out the options game, and shout out to UnusualWhales, by the way, if you want to use my code, it's in the description. You can follow my balls and suck my dick and give me that fat fucking affiliate code program money with code ASTRO. So with things like UnusualWhales, though, that makes it really, 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 really easy. But if everybody were to figure out how to play these moves, then you would see the value of these moves being magnified. If you know how to play options, you can actually force hedgies or institutions or anyone who has the sheer size of balls to move this thing with options. You can push them into a really, really, really dark corner. Because when you buy a call, okay, when you buy a call, you actually are creating a massive, massive, massive amount of force in the other direction of what whoever wrote them thinks it's going to be. What does that mean? Well, if someone were to write 10,000 calls, and we know that there's 100 shares per call, if you were to take that 10,000 call amount, multiply that by 100. Okay, so that's 1 million shares. So 10,000 calls equates to 1 million shares. If someone were to hedge for all of these, right? 10,000 calls equating to 1 million shares. Well, if someone had to hedge for this, then you can actually create a lot of upward pressure if you know how to play it. And that's what no one wants to talk about. No one wants to talk about what actually is going on with options, and rather would want to vilify them and say they're the devil's work. But anywho, that's what you can force to happen. And the more that you have people buying calls, well, you'll see the premiums naturally navigate their way up the chain, which means that if max pain is a concept, then you would see that part of the spectrum being forced to the long side. It's shit like this, and it sounds complicated, but it's really not. It just takes a little bit of time to dig into. But that's what happens when you start to learn options. So when people on Twitter and Reddit and whatever the fuck, I hate fucking seeing people like this. When you see them trying to blame those who buy options or this, that, and whatever, it's so fucking stupid. And if anyone was out there trying to vilify options so that no one would use them, well, good to you, man. You fucking did it. You fucking did it, you piece of shit. So I'm just going to leave it there. I hope that made sense. If not, I got plenty of videos on the way to explain. With that being said, thank you so much. Like, sub, fondle. I'm out.